Hello and welcome to Macc-Pow at Home, a series of cosy chats with cartoonists and those from the world of comics. Supported as ever by Macclesfield Town Council, who support Macc-Pow, the physical event. But this year we are going online, doing a virtual version, which gives me a chance to have some little chats and some longer chats with some of the creators who have been, some who were going to come, and some who maybe I can tempt to come one year when we're back in person. Fingers crossed next year. But why let the pesky pandemic stop us having some fun? So today, my guest is none other than cartoonist Lew Stringer, who has been a staple of Macc-Pow since it first started. And I'm going to chat to Lew about his work, about being involved with Macc-Pow, and anything else we can do. So I'm going to bring Lew in. I've got a few little tricks. Let me get my tricks lined up. If you've been watching this show so far, you know all about the no expense spared on this show. But we're going to bring it in here with this. Let's bring Lew in. You hear with the applause there, Lew? Can you hear the applause?
Thanks very much. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Lew. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Yeah.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. You're looking well.
Thank you. Well, I've been on the garden today doing some work, so I've got a bit sunburned.
Right. Yeah. I know. So it's a healthy glow, Lew. I like it. So yeah. So as I mentioned in the introduction, there's a number of things that we can talk about today, and we can come at them from all different. I'll put your. So I'm going to put. I've got a few little tricks here, Lew, that I can throw some little things. So yeah. So for those people who don't know you, you are a cartoonist, and amongst many other things, you work for the Beano, the Dandy, Oink. Transformers, which was through Marvel UK and things like that. Well, we're going to get into all that. I mentioned as well, in connecting it with Macc-Pow, you've attended every Macc-Pow so far, and
Yeah.
I think whether you'll remember this, but you were my first person who I asked, and when you said yes, it kind of got the ball rolling to kind of make it real, really.
Well, I'm honoured. I mean, it's always been a pleasure to do your events, Mark, because Macclesfield's a nice place to visit anyway, and you always look after the guests, and it's been good to see it build from year to year. Yeah, and hopefully, will again when we're allowed to go back and do the physical ones.
Yeah, and it's funny as well because I would, obviously you've been to a lot of comic events over your career. And you would always talk about them, obviously promote on the run up, and then talk about them afterwards. And you would mention, I think I remember, you would mention certain things, and I would sort of take note about, not necessarily the wants and needs of a big celebrity comics guest, but just the little things to make it, to make the event something that people want to come back to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you also helped in that way as well, Lee. So I am always eternally grateful, and also because I've always been a fan of your work. And well, 1 second, let me just make sure I just turn that off before. There you go, we're back in. So I've always been a fan of your work since. Now I obviously I don't want to make you feel old, Lou, because you were just a child when I first discovered you. But I first discovered you. In the pages of, there's a number of places it could have been, but more than likely I think it was the comic strip you did, Robo Capers, for Transformers.
Yes, yeah. That was one of my first regular strips. So when it was 85, I think, started on that.
Yes,
and that ran for 100 and odd issues, 130, 40 issues, something like that. But yeah, that was a good one. That sort of gave me the discipline to sort of do a weekly strip.
Yes,
and that was from Marvel UK back in those days. So that was a good one. And then that led to Combat Colin, of course, which
that's Action Force, was it?
Combat Colin was in Action Force. That's the character behind me, Combat Colin. That was in Action Force. Then Action Force merged into Transformers.
Yes, of course, yeah.
So Combat Colin then replaced Robo Capers, which was fine because I've done over 100 of those. So I could do with a break. And then that kind of went from strength to strength, and they gave it a full page, and it ran in Transformers right until the comic finished.
Right.
So, right. It had a good 4-year run, I think it was.
So where was Macho Man? I was trying to remember where Macho Man was.
Yeah, that was about 87, 88, something like that, was it? It was in the Secret Wars comic.
Oh, was it? Oh, right, okay, right.
Yeah. So we didn't do that. Was just a kind of a filler because I only did about 11 altogether.
Really? Really?
Yeah, it was just a sort of a half page that they'd use every now and then when they had space, because obviously most of the comic was geared up to be a reprinted Marvel's Secret Wars story.
Yes.
And if they had a half page spare, they'd put in the Macho Man story. So it was only 11 issues over the whole run, It
was kind of like the Faulty Towers of comic strips. I think it's because I obviously loved Robo Capers, but then I definitely latched on to Combat Colin and Macho Man because I liked because what I loved about your work was seeing something in a comic where the comic itself was very much sort of I'm going to say steeped in realism, but obviously Transformers it wasn't. But the artistic style was not cartoony. It was more of a realistic kind of style, dealing with these fantastical kind of things. But then suddenly in the pages I saw your little strip, and I latched onto that because that was kind of how I like to draw and how I saw myself, in creating comics. And it was nice for the likes of me to in and amongst a comic that I was enjoying to see that there were varying styles in there.
Well, the idea for that came from the old 1960s comics. Richard Starkings was the editor of those Marvel UK comics, and he'd grown up with those sort of 1960s comics, and he liked the idea of having a bit of humor relief in an adventure comic. So, like you say, you get it all adventure strips, and then you have at the back you got the little comedy strip, just as a balance, a bit of variety. So I was happy to go along with that because that's the kind of comics that I was used to when I was a kid as well. Yeah. And I think it does help. I think it does help to just. I mean, 2000 AD these days has Droid Life, doesn't it? Every now and then. By Cat Sullivan, so they still have that kind of tradition, and it's a thing that goes back into the history of comics.
Yes.
But yeah, it was good, and Richard gave me lots of work on those Marvel UK weeklies. So I had Macho Man in Secret Wars, and I was doing Slimer for a while in the Ghostbusters comic.
Yeah.
And it's like Combat Colin and that, and so yeah, it was a good place to. I mean, that was Marvel UK was the first publisher that accepted my work.
Yeah.
So
it's thrill, isn't it? With it, it's Marvel UK, but it's Marvel.
Yeah, it was Marvel. It's definitely Marvel Comics. It was just the London branch, but it wasn't a licensed thing. It was Marvel Comics. So it was great to work for those. No,
definitely, because one of the things that I so obviously following your work, but had seeing that week to week, and then the first time I went to a comic shop was Nostalgia and Comics in Nottingham.
Oh yes.
And I was trying to sort of figure out how that came about a few years ago. How did I know that was happening? Because obviously back then, this is like the sort of like 86, 87. The first time I visited there, the reason I visited there was because Marvel UK were coming to Nostalgia and Comics in Nottingham. And so I was trying to figure out, well, how did I know that? Because obviously we've not got the internet. How would I have known that was going on? To then say to my parents, could we go to this? Because the editor, who would I be right in thinking that was Paul Neary? Or was it?
Yeah, Paul Neary was the editor for a while. That was just before I worked for them, and then he came back again in 1990 or 91.
So who was your editor then? Who would have been the person commissioning?
The first editor was Bernie J on the Daredevils comic, and then Sheila Crano on the early issues of Transformers. They had a lot of different editors coming and going on Transformers. Simon Furman was there for a time, and Harry Papadopoulos on the Bumper comic.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, there was Ian Rimmer. You know,
that's the guy. That's who I'm looking. Yeah.
right. Yes.
Yeah. Because the person had, so basically, I managed to convince my parents to go to this place, and we took a friend of mine from school as well, and we got some family that way. So I think we might have tied it in with a little bit of a visit. So there was a way to, you know, sort of justify it even more. Well, we could go and visit these people as well, you know, and so yeah, it was my first time going into a comic shop. I'd heard that not only the Marvel UK guys were going to be there, that Spider-Man was going to be there as well.
Oh well, good.
Yeah, which is a nice little connection to Macc-Pow, and possibly where I got that idea. And we can maybe mention that afterwards as well. And Spider-Man was going to be there. So I kind of walk in, and I'm sort of like, 13 years old, and suddenly there's this shop that's just full of American comics. I don't know whether that was. I don't think it was the first time I bought an American comic. You used to be able to get random titles in newsagents.
Yes.
Because of the distribution. You'd be able to go in there, and there'd just be like a little rack of comics, and then at the end there'd be like a small section of American ones. So I definitely don't think it was the first time I got an American comic, but I'd never seen them literally everywhere. And so I was chatting to the editor, and I had taken some of my little comics that I'd made, and I've got to say, Lou, I was more interested about how you had your comics in there. How did that come about in terms of asking him how does Lou do, and how does that work? And he was kind of telling me, but he was being quite cool with me, to be honest, Lou. I was just a young guy, and he kind of looked at my comics, and he kind of looked and sort of kind of smiled. But I was kind of nervous as well, and I think it was the first time I've been somewhere where it was quite apparent that it wasn't just me that liked these things, and but that little switch hadn't switched in my brain at that point. So when he asked me who Spider-Man's secret identity was, of course I knew it, but I didn't say it. I was like, oh, I don't know, because I didn't realize I was in a safe place. And I think that's what comic shops.
You didn't want to betray Spider-Man by giving away his secret identity.
I also didn't want to do that. I didn't think that was appropriate. And then years later, I discovered from flipping through some of my old comics, looking at your strips and just generally seeing what it was I had back then. I saw the advert for this particular event. And that's where I realised I saw an advert in the comic, and that's how I knew it was going. And then last year before last, I mentioned this on Twitter, and I meant to take down his name. You'll know who I'm talking about, but I don't know whether either. We both spoke to him at the Nottingham Comic Con. He was there with his daughter. I can't think what his handle is. Oh, Mr. Happy Go Lucky, he goes by the name of, I think, on Twitter. He used to work at Nostalgia and Comics. And he latched onto this conversation about what we're talking about now. And he then showed me this, Lou, which he then sent me, which is the artwork, the original artwork for that advert.
Oh,
which isn't done by yourself.
No, it's by Mike Higgs.
Yes, that's correct. Mike Higgs indeed, yes. And so I thought that was definitely worth sharing. And yeah, he very kindly sent it to me because he said, I realised that was quite kind of like a big deal. This visit was the catalyst for what came afterwards, and so so that was really quite nice to see that in person.
Well, there's a connection there because Mike Higgs was a hero of mine when I was reading comics as a kid in the '60s when he was doing the Cloak in Pow comic, and then in the '80s I worked for him as his assistant.
Oh, really? Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. So I was going over to Birmingham every day to work at his house, just basic art duties, rolling out pages, inking backgrounds, and things like that. And he became a good friend. So
wow! I had no idea of that connection.
There we go, small world. And
to be honest, if it hadn't got his signature on, and somebody said that's Lou's, I kind of can see a little bit of your work in that. Lou.
Yeah. Oh yeah, big influence on me. Yeah.
Yeah, I if somebody said no, Lou's done that, I'd go yeah, and yeah. So I could so I did that. What a nice connection. So yeah, that was and it was just really cool to own that. So yeah, so that's kind of where, you know, I kind of discovered it was more trying to find out how you got your stuff in there, and obviously you got that as well. So at the same time as doing those comics for Marvel UK, is that when you were doing Oink as well? Oink came after?
Yeah, just after. Yeah, Marvel UK. The first stuff I did for Marvel UK was in 1983 on the Daredevils, and then that led to Captain Wally on the Spider-Man comic and a few other things. And Oink came along in 1986. Well, we published in 1986.
Yes.
The first strips we did for the dummy issue in 1984. So yeah, it's pretty much concurrent with that. So I was doing Tom Thug and Peter's Pimple in Oink at the same time as doing Combat Colin and other strips from our UK. So it was you know, it was quite a busy time, and it was good to work for IPC and Marvel at the same time. You know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because as you know, you've got to take everything you can get, haven't you?
Yeah.
And you've got to see how you can push yourself to what is your, not necessarily breaking point, but what is your capacity.
I think I'm past that.
Yeah.
I think. Well, I was very fortunate in that I started out doing exactly what I wanted to do. I always wanted to create my own characters, do kind of superhero spoofs, comedy serials, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And have control over what I was doing, and that's what I was doing with Combat Colin. And in Oink, I had a spin on the traditional kind of comics.
Yes.
With Tom Thug and Pete's Pimple, so that it was taken. It's the kid with gimmick, but it was sort of extreme version.
Yeah.
It was twisted and that kind of thing. And then able to do sort of one-offs and things like that. So it was good to start off my career having that kind of control and having and doing exactly what I wanted. And then later on, you know, it was, you know, you end up sort of doing things with more regimented and maybe scripts from other people and things like that. But yeah, it was a good way to start, certainly for a few years. Yeah.
How do you find working with other people doing the scripts, especially with sort of humor comics?
Fine, yeah. I mean, it depends on the script, but I mean, I can't remember any bad experiences. You know, well, there's a couple of times when the writers may be very new and they don't really quite understand how things work. I remember one thing, I shan't mention it by name, but a few years ago, I was asked to do all these things going on in each panel, and it was impossible to have. It was from two different viewpoints in the same panel.
I think I remember.
And also multiple things happening
in
one static image, and you can't do that.
No.
So I had to sort of rewrite that a little bit and change bits. But yeah, normally it's good. I mean, John Freeman, I enjoyed working with him on the Rebellion specials, you know, the Buster specials.
Yeah.
And with the Keck W on the next one that's coming up, the Monster Fun special, which is coming out in September.
Yes.
We've brought back Wiz War, which was a strip from Pow and Smash Comics in the 60s. So we've revived that for that. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to work with other writers. I work with oh god, I always forget his name. Ian Macclesfield on Super Score for the Beano for a few years, you know, and he's a very good writer because he's trained at DC Thompson, so
you
know, he knows his stuff. Yeah, I do prefer to write my own material, but I'm happy to work with writers as well.
I think when you've got your own stuff, you can, you know, you haven't got as much concern about, you know, you've got a script that's been, you know, because when a writer gives you the script, I mean, I would imagine this to, you know, in certain writers, this is the script and there's no deviating from it. You've got to try and make it work. But when you've got your own stuff, you can kind of move things around a little bit. And if you've, for some reason, maybe made a decision where you've got this character talking before the other character, and suddenly you realise, well, hang on, the way I've set this up, they're on the other side of each other, on the wrong side at this point. You can make those little revisions, can't you? And it's a lot easier when you're doing your own stuff. And you're still 100% in terms of the drawing, 100% traditional, aren't you? Pen and ink.
I am, yeah. I do, yeah, it's pen and ink, and then but the colours are all done on Photoshop. So yeah, I do the artwork like, you know, like that. That's the next Doctor Who magazine thing. You shouldn't be showing that yet. And then scan it in and colour it with Photoshop.
And you work twice up?
Yes, twice up. I just find it easier to you know, if you're going to put some detail in, you're going to put small characters in. It's easier to draw them,
Yes.
twice the size it's going to be published. So especially if you're lettering it as well, you know. So,
yeah. So if you're doing a full page, so is that like you do that in 2 halves, or?
I do it in 2 halves, yeah, because so it's on 2. Each half page would be on an A3 sheet.
Right. Okay.
It depends. If it's one full page illustration, I'll probably do it half up, so it will be on one A3 sheet.
Yeah.
But if it's a strip, I'll do it twice up. Yeah.
So if you do the 2 halves of a page, is there any point where you've done like a little rough layout just so you can see how those panels all connect together, or are you just that much?
Sometimes a basic one, but I kind of, after all this time, I kind of know it.
Yeah.
In my head, you know, I can sort of visualize it. So I don't tend to do breakdowns. I just sort of do it straight onto the page. I mean, I'll do light pencils first. So if something's not working, I'll erase that and change the position of the characters. But it's pretty much, you know, straight onto the page.
And all the characterization comes out in the inks.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very minimal kind of detail in the pencil, just to get positions, and so you know which characters.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, if it's a position of a character or you know, a piece of architecture or something I haven't drawn before, I'll do it more detail in the pencils.
Yeah.
But if it's just character walking down the street, it'll probably be a lighter sort of roughed out things. But the pencils are very sort of busy. I mean, you know, I'm sort of changing things as they go along, and then, you know, I know which is the right line to ink kind of thing. But anybody else would probably be confused by what's this mess.
It is amazing how you kind of know yourself, isn't it? That you just know where things are, and you just kind of, you know, I don't do a great deal of planning, to be honest. I kind of, you know, sometimes I might just sort of, to remind myself, just do a little circle to say, oh, that thing is there. But for the most part, it's just kind of going sort of straight in, because I think the spontaneity, particularly in what we do, it's all about spontaneity, isn't it? And I think
yes,
comics have got quite a little bit, you know, the more realistic comics, particularly things that are coming out of Marvel and DC, are quite rigid and a bit stiff, I find, these days. And I think that the fluidity of comics has kind of gone a little bit. I was looking at, I recently bought a collection of New Mutants Collection by Bill Sienkiewicz, the classic Demon Bear saga, which is something that I kind of, I was into comics right at that time, but it kind of, I was picking up other things at the time, and I was aware of it, but just not. I don't think I'd never read it. I probably saw it on the shelves, but never read it. But in the back of that collection is a more recent comic, I think X-Force or something like that's connected to the original story, and the change in styles is very dramatic, from what we know as the flat colours and the real focus on line. And this is what I was going to say, is that what I like about seeing the black and white art that you do, you know, obviously I like seeing the finished thing and with the colours, but your work holds up so well in black and white that it's the traditional work that almost doesn't need color, because you put all the work in to the line work, and the color is just an addition. Whereas I think a lot of the time these days with digital coloring's almost become, well, it's not ready until it's colored. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I will change the technique a little bit if I'm just doing it for black and white. I'll have, you know, more cross hatching and backgrounds and things like that. So there's things I do leave out if I'm doing it for color. But I know what you mean. I think some of the comics, you know, particularly the adventure things, I think the colors are too heavy sometimes. It's because the color digitally, and on screen it might look bright and colorful, that when it's transferred to print, the print can absorb the color, and you know, you get all these purples and browns, and it's
very muddy.
Line work is covered and hidden by the color.
Yes.
So, you know, they've got a good colorist. I mean, there are lots of good colorists around. They'll know what they're doing, and that won't be noticeable. So it will still bring out the line work, you know, as well as having the color there.
Yeah, because you don't want it to be literally hidden behind layers and layers of color. But then also, you know, just referencing what I just referenced with Bill Sienkiewicz, one of the reasons why he stopped doing the interior comics is because he was fed up of how his work was getting reproduced on newsprint. So the things that I love about newsprint, the off-registered colours and everything, to some cartoonists, it's like, oh my god, look at my work. You can't even see what it looks like because the colours are all slipping out of the line and stuff like that. So it's interesting to see that, you know, whereas digital colouring, you've got so much more control, haven't you, over things like that, and obviously paper and stuff like that. And so more recently, so tell me, I know obviously some of the titles that you've been working for more recently, but one of those is the 77.
Yes.
And you've created the character
it's Sergeant Shouty, who is well, there's more to the story yet, but he's kind of a parody of Captain Hurricane from the old Valiant comics, and that you know, there's this hulking figure who gets triggered by the slightest thing and flies into a rage. But then we find out in issue 3 is actually a construct, is a synthetic being that's been created that's gone wrong, but it's deliberately gone wrong. He's been sabotaged, so that's why he's so volatile.
Okay.
And the stories, you know, I think, well, probably be another 1 or 2 chapters to this story arc, but I'll just sort of show the page to the camera so we can see. That's the current one. That's his enemy, Dr. Plank.
Dr. Plank. It's classic. It's classic Lew Stringer, in my opinion. It literally could have come straight out of the old Marvel UK days.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the sort of feeling I get when I'm drawing it as well.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a retro comic, but I'm just doing my own thing anyway. But it's a good comic because there's a variety of material in there from, you know, different styles. And like we were saying before, you know, there's all the adventure stuff, and then there's my humour page. So hopefully it'll be a nice balance to.
Yeah, and it's nice to see that these titles, and it's nice. I think I think it was either you or I think maybe it was actually John Freeman shared the cover for the next issue. And it's nice to see. I really do think it's going from strength to strength, that title. You know, as you know, when things start out, you're trying to find your feet, aren't you? Really, and I think, but I think they're doing a really nice job of pulling it all together now. Yeah,
I mean, it's an independent comic, so you know, a lot of the people working on it are new, and then you've got some older people like me and Mike Collins on it as well, and so it's a good balance, I think, and it is improving every issue because you know, they're learning on the job kind of thing. But it's always been a well-designed comic, and you know, it's got a good attitude behind it. So I think hopefully it'll carry on.
Is it and it's monthly?
No, it's quarterly. So there's quite
okay.
Quite a few gaps between each issue.
Right.
But you know, it's. You know, it's over 60 pages an issue, so there's plenty to read.
I think, you know, what I like about it is, as you know, Lou, there's definitely a few people out there who it's the same old thing of the British comic industry is dead, blah blah blah. You know, there's only the Beano. It's not what it used to be, and it's just not true. And I think that we all. You know, you all have things that you remember from your childhood. And sometimes the things that you hold so dearly in your childhood, when you then revisit them, they're not perhaps as you know, they captured a moment, but the things that you like now are probably vastly improved on some of the things that you held. So, you know, you rewatch a film. I recently rewatched the 1980 Flash Gordon remake, which I loved that film, but when I rewatched it, it was, you know, it was a little struggle at times because it wasn't quite as magical as I remembered it, but I still enjoyed it. And I think it's such a shame that people hold on to these things so much and dismiss.
Yeah, I think it's something that annoys me as well. You know, it's possible to like things from your past without putting down stuff from the present, which crops up a lot on comics forums, doesn't it? You know, it's not as good as, you know, and they sort of dismiss the current stuff without even looking at it a lot of the time. But yeah, I think some people are fans of their own nostalgia. You know, they're fans of their own childhood rather than actually being fans of comics in general. because there's still a lot of stuff out there. I mean, not in newsagents. I agree. You know, the comics industry in newsagents is virtually nil. You know, there's 2000 AD, Beano, Phoenix, Commando, Judge Dredd, and a few others, but there's not the dozens and dozens of titles there used to be.
No.
You know, even the children's magazines like Toxic that used to have originated strips in now only have reprints in there. So that's, you know, it is dwindling. But at the same time, there's tons of graphic novels, as you know. So there's a market in bookshops. You know, so that's the place to look for comics these days.
No, I think, you know, you've got the bookshops, and then you've got the incredible sort of indie comic scene of people self-publishing.
Yeah.
I think to say that there's no scene is kind of a laziness, really, and maybe comes from, I hadn't really thought of it that way, comes from people who aren't really fans of comics, they're fans of their childhood. You know, you can knock things that when they do remakes of things and stuff like that, or it's not the version of it that I liked. I remember, you know, obviously Marvel UK used to put out the Thundercats comic, which possibly is the only one that you didn't have a comic in. Am I right?
I did.
What did you have in Thundercats?
It was One Cat in His Cod.
I remember that.
I think John Freeman wrote it. I might be wrong, but I think I didn't write that. But it might have been Ian Rimmer himself writing it. I can't remember.
Right. I remember that.
Yeah, that was in that. But I didn't do it for long. I think I did. I don't know, 15 episodes, 20 episodes maybe at the most, and then Nick Abadzis took over.
Right.
He's always busy doing, you know, so much stuff. I thought, you know, that was the one where, because I wasn't writing it, I thought, no, I'll leave that and carry on with some other stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I was in Thundercats. Yeah.
No, right. Yeah. So Thundercats obviously was a big thing at the time. It was a comic, got the animated show, and then not really. I wasn't really aware of. Years later, they kind of brought that back, and they did other versions. And then more recently, they did a full-blown Cartoon Network kind of Adventure Time kind of style version of Thundercats. Oh my word! And that caused absolute mayhem. You know, with this isn't the Thundercats that I grew up with. You think, well, you've still got the Thundercats that you grew up with. No one's erased that from existence. It's still there. And if you want to go and watch that, there's plenty of ways you can do it. And maybe this new version isn't aimed at you. So calm yourself down and stop getting angry. And for the most part, the people who are doing all this are guys, aren't they? I very rarely, if ever, see any ladies on these forums who are complaining about things like this. And I don't know what it is about guys. We all do like to complain. We're British, and that is part of what we do. But I think, particularly when you work in the industry, it's frustrating when people just criticize when you know full well that what they're saying isn't actually factual. I think it's something we have to live with, but it can be annoying when they're not being truthful about it, you know, when the sort of, I mean, some of the things I've read recently is about, the Beano is not as good as it was. When was the last time you read it? 1985. Yes. They haven't even read it for decades. Yeah. And they're just going on what they've read on a Daily Mail headline about diversity, you know. You're getting angry at things you haven't even seen. Yeah, because if you were to sit down and read an issue of the Beano from when you read it as a child, it wouldn't. You would like it, but it wouldn't entertain you the way it did as a child. Of course not. No, exactly. Of course not. Because it's not geared up for that. Because it's like, you know, I wouldn't buy a children's book and expect to get excited by it, you know, because it's for children. It's you know, that's what it's for. And when you're remembering how the Beano affected you, or whatever comic, you know, it's because you're remembering as a child, you're discovering new things every day. Yes. So the humor is fresh and new, and you know, but now you're going to think, oh yeah, that's a bit old hat. Of course it is. You know, it's 60 years later. Yeah. And if there wasn't any industry, then the comic events that we've both been to, and you've been to so many more, no one would come to them if there was no industry, and so it's just a nonsense, isn't it? Really. And the industry's changed, you know. Yeah. As we said, you know, it's
there are graphic novels in bookshops now, which there wasn't when we were kids.
No.
But but if you can't just walk into a newsagent and look at the shelves and think that's it. There's no comics industry because, like you said, there's the independent scene. There's bookshops. There's the internet. There's digital comics like Aces Weekly and things like that.
Yeah, and you've done. You were in the. Were you in the first issue of Aces Weekly or the first volume?
Yeah. No, I was in the first issue. Yeah, I've only done 5 Combat Colin stories for Aces Weekly over the last. How long has it been? 10 years.
It's got to be getting close to it, hasn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I think it's 10 years. But anyway, yeah. So I just do it every now and then. But it's out there. David Lloyd gets a new issue out every Monday night. The digital version, and volume 7 now. 7, isn't it? So it's 350 issues or more like that is done.
Yeah. No, he's done an amazing job, and I think it's hard to know whether it would still have had that longevity if he tried to put it out in print.
Yeah, I don't think it would, because you're dealing with so much. I mean, the big difference these days with print comics, of course, especially newsagents and supermarkets, is that publishers have to pay the retailers thousands of pounds just for shelf space.
Yes,
that didn't happen in the 60s and 70s.
No.
So that's a deterrent to publishers as well, unfortunately.
No, and that's just going to slow things down and bring things to a halt, aren't they? So I think we are fortunate that you can be making comics. You can go to events in a normal time. When the comic events can take place, and I know that you yourself went to a lot. It would be from being connected with you and friends with you on Facebook, knowing that you were going here, you were going there,
yeah,
and then that just kind of stopped. And that was a huge part of your business, so to speak, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, because conventions are great to promote your work and stuff, and but the real thing is meeting the readers and meeting fellow creators like yourself. And so that it's a social life as well as the business thing, and suddenly it all went. But we'll get back there. I've got one lined up for September.
Oh, have you?
Yeah, it's the Meanwhile event in Coventry, but that'll be outdoors. That'll be in the grounds of the old cathedral.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I saw them promote that. So that's a new one, isn't it?
It is. Yes. Excuse me, getting dry.
Yes, right.
But yeah, so that's I'll only be there for the day, I think.
Right.
But that's not far from me, so that'll be
right.
Handy to go along there,
Yeah, so that's
get back into things that way.
I know it's been tough for so many people in so many different ways, and some of us have been fortunate in terms of it not being tough, as in actually getting ill or losing people, or but it's affected everybody in all different ways, and particularly when you work for yourself and you're a freelancer, there's no guarantees at the best of times. But when you see things stopping publishing, I've spoken to the other creators that I've done these interviews with, and the fact that at one point both Marvel and DC and all the other big names didn't actually publish comics for a while.
Yeah, they did, didn't they? Yeah, they did sort of suspend publishing for a few months. Yeah,
I think it was definitely a couple of months, if not maybe a few more. And it's, that was unheard of, and I know that some people had got things that were coming out, projects that were about to come out last year, and everything kind of gets put on hold, and people tie these releases in with events, don't they? So you might have something new, so you sort of aim towards an event you're doing and think, right, I'm going to have this for this event and that kind of thing, and it's tough, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it took us all by surprise, didn't it? Really. I mean, even over here, 2000 AD carried on publishing every week, so and as did the Beano, but things like Starburst magazine, that was put on hold. And then it came back, and now it's on hold again, So, and some things, was it Sci-Fi Now magazine, that's ended altogether? So, it's had an effect. And with comics, there's the first issue of a new comic that came out, unfortunately, the same week as the first lockdown, which was the Liverpool Heartbeat comic that Tim Quinn was editing. So the idea, that was going to be, I don't know how regular it was going to be, but there was going to be certainly more than one issue.
Right. Okay.
And and the idea was to take it around schools and and give it to school kids, but of course all the schools were closed. So that sort of kiboshed that. But then I worked with Tim again later last year on the earlier this year, wasn't it, on the Liverpool Heartbeat comic. So, but that is just a one-off, that's
yes,
statues at Liverpool.
Yeah.
That's sort of educational.
Yeah, and it's nice to do some different stuff, isn't it, as well? And I think
I mean that was written by Tim, so it was good working with him because he's an experienced writer, so he knows his stuff. But that made a change because it was sort of done. I had to draw it sort of semi-realistically.
Yes.
And even sort of this, I had to draw the Blitz, which is quite a harrowing thing to draw, really. But it was a nice change to sort of do something like that.
Has anything come out of this, or have you had any opportunities come out of this that you wouldn't have had if this hadn't have happened?
Not that I can think of. It's just been less work rather than anything new. I mean, I've got a few things on now. I'm pleased to say, I'm sort of, I've got a very busy June and July,
right,
and hopefully beyond that, but we'll see. But because people are getting a bit more confident now about there was a project I was working on last year, and that was sort of put on hold as well, but that's back up and running now.
Right.
Because
obviously
there's a big thing I'm doing which I can't talk about because I haven't had the contract yet. But it's not a comics thing, but it's in comic style. So
right, okay. Oh, well, I look forward to
about that soon, hopefully.
Yeah. And you've done stuff for the Beano and the Dandy, and have you got stuff coming up for the Beanos soon? Because obviously,
I'm working. Yeah, the thing I'm working on, started on today, is work for the annual,
right,
the Beano and Dandy annuals that will be out next year.
So the Christmas annuals next year.
Oh yeah, it gets very confusing with the timeline.
Yeah.
But it's the Beano and Dandy annuals, which will be dated 2023.
Right.
And they'll be in the shops next August 2022.
Right.
And we're drawing them now in the summer of 2021.
Well,
so
when you see your stuff sort of, you've done it now, and then you see it sort of summer next year. Are you comfortable enough now just to know, that's how I would approach it now, and not sort of look at it too critically, or do you not really study your stuff anyway?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's always, every time I see my stuff, I always sort of see, flaws in it, and you think, ways you could have done it better. But weirdly enough, if you look at it again years later, you look at it, you think, oh, that's not too bad. It's because you're seeing it through fresh eyes, I suppose.
Yeah, because things can jump out at you, can't they? How did I not even see that? It's like glaringly like an error to you, but fortunately not really to anybody else. It's more just that we're so critical.
I think we all are, and I think it's a good thing to be because you can't get conceited in this business. It's just ridiculous. And I think if you are self-critical, say in any profession, if you are, without being harshly self-critical, but if it's the only way to move forward. Because if you get complacent and think, I'm brilliant, you're never going to progress any further than that because you already think you're great.
It shows that you care, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think a lot of us do have kind of imposter syndrome. We're thinking, we're going to get discovered any minute, and people realise we should be in the business. But without going that extreme, I think it's good to have a healthy sort of critique of your own work and think, I'll learn from that and I'll do that a bit better next time. And that inking's a bit too rough there, or I didn't quite get that right. So it's the only way to move forward in any creative industry, I think.
No, definitely. And I think, and the same kind of thought that obviously when you're doing stuff where you're dealing with like weeklies or or a regular turnaround of stuff, you've got to know when to just leave it, haven't you, and go, this is done. Have the confidence to say, I'm done. This is let's this has got to be sent. I can't keep messing around with this.
Yes, of course, yeah.
And I think we've got a couple of might have a couple of little comments here, Lou. We might have somebody. Let's have a look. Oh, there you go. Well, here we go. Yeah. The young gentleman. I haven't put them on. He's kind of. He's just made a comment. He said, "This will make you laugh." When I'll put it on here, Lou. And he's, when I make mistakes, I punch myself in the face.
Which you don't want to do that.
Yeah, which seems quite excessive. However, when I tell you that this has come from a gentleman who, although we shouldn't really reveal the secret identity of Spider-Man, I believe that is the Macclesfield's answer to Spider-Man. My friend and yours, a gentleman called Shay.
Hello, Shay.
Yes, and so I've known Shay for many years, and Shay very kindly, he was, so basically when we did the first Macc-Pow, I had suddenly I thought, right, well, I need to get my guests, as you know, it was a smaller event, hopefully with a big heart, but a smaller event. I needed to get the guests from the station to the location. And I was aware that perhaps expecting people to just head into Macclesfield and find the place wasn't the right thing to do. But I didn't have a big team. Obviously a lot of comic events have lots of volunteers and a team. I didn't have a crack team. I had kind of myself, and I thought, well, I can't be running across as much as I wanted to meet you at the station. And that's when I suddenly decided or realized, well, what I need is some colour to the day to make people also think, oh, what's happening here in Macclesfield, like a walking advert. And so I decided to send Spider-Man to meet you, which I know was great fun. It was
quite bizarre stepping off the train and seeing Spider-Man on the platform waiting for me. And the number of people who just walked past thinking it was perfectly normal.
It's just another day in Macclesfield, I think.
Yeah.
I think what I don't know whether I've actually told you. Shay's also given this. This is quite heartfelt. I love you, Lou. There you go. That's nice. But what I don't know whether I told you was that at one point there was going to be a possible somebody else was going to dress up as a supervillain, and I wasn't going to tell you this, and I'm so sad that this didn't happen. And as you came up from the station into Macclesfield, for those people who don't know, you come up a really nice cobble street and you come into the centre of the town. And at the top of the street was going to be, I don't know, for instance, the Green Goblin waiting to have then a mock battle in front of you in the middle of Macclesfield town centre, which I think would have been quite amusing.
I think it was fine just having a Spider-Man escort me from the station. I think that might have been a bit too much.
It might, well, you say that now, Lou. You never know. It could have been the best day of your life. But no, it's always been great to welcome you there, Lou. And I don't want to take too much of your time now because I know you've got comics to make, Lou. You've got comics to make, and so what is coming up for you next?
I'm doing Biffo the Bear. I'll be drawing him now for the Beano annual, and then I've got Key K to do for the Dandy one and Postman Pratt to do for that. And then I've just sent off the latest Doctor Who magazine. But yeah, the next Sergeant Shouty will be due soon for the 77 number 6. And what else? Oh yeah, just a few other bits and bobs I can't talk about yet. But yeah, it's I'm keeping busy, so hopefully it'll continue.
Yeah, it's good to hear, and I think what I love about what you just said, and hopefully we get a chance to share these interviews, and we've got a couple of people watching live, and we can get a chance to share these afterwards. And what I think would be great is if potentially any young cartoonists, aspiring cartoonists, watch these, because for you to just reel off the jobs, and these are the things that you make your living doing, the jobs that you've got coming up, Keyhole Kate, Biffo the Bear, Sergeant Shouty. How much fun does that sound? And I think it's a testament to you that after all these years, that you're still getting a chance to say that these are what you're doing for your job. So
I'm still enjoying it as well, after nearly 40 years. So, yeah.
No, it's an amazing career, one you should be very proud of, Lou, and I'm so pleased that I've got a chance to talk to you today. And last year we had a little bit of a technical glitch.
Yes.
Yeah, but we're not gonna let that stop us. Luckily, the pandemic gave us the chance to try and do this properly again. So there's always a positive, isn't there?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we wouldn't be doing this otherwise, would we? So, but no, it's been great to talk to you, Mark, and I'll be watching some of the other shows you're doing. So.
Oh well, thank you very much, Lou, and I hope next year you'll always be the first person I get in touch with for Macc-Pow. It's like when you wear your favourite pair of socks.
That's me. Put that quote on the back of my autobiography.
Yeah. But I think it's a case of I do. I think you're a staple of the UK comic scene, and long may that be the case, Lou. So stay well and keep making those comics. And I just got to say that next Tuesday, when are we on next? Let me just go and have a quick look. I should have written this down, but I didn't. Yeah, Tuesday the 15th of June, I'll be chatting to a cartoonist, comic artist Lucy Sullivan at 2 p.m. on this channel. So Lucy is also somebody from the British comic, the thriving British comic scene, and the total opposite to the style that you have, Lou. And so that's just shows the varied creators that are out there. Yep. So yes, I look forward to talking to Lucy. But in the meantime, let me just get my little gimmicks again, Lou. So if you want to, you can check out Lou's work on Lew Stringer comics.blogspot.com. The link is there on the bottom. And Lou regularly posts his work on there. You can follow Lou on Facebook, Instagram, you're on Twitter, and all the usual places. So yeah, all I want to say now, Lou, is thank you so much. Thank you for your time. And we started with a huge round of applause. So thank you very much, Lou. Take care. Stay well. See you soon.
Thanks, Mark. All the best.
So thank you once again to Lew Stringer. It's a great chat. One of my heroes, so it's always a thrill to have to chat to Lou. When I first got a chance to meet Lou many years ago, it was a real thrill, and it's so great to see that these creators that you grew up with are still making comics, and so it's really inspiring to a cartoonist like me. So yeah, as I said, Tuesday next week, Tuesday the 15th, will be Lucy Sullivan at 2 p.m. UK time. So please join in. If you've been watching this, not live, but you've been watching this on repeat, hello, thank you for watching. Any comments you want to put in below, you can do. And until next time, I will see you later. Take care. Bye-bye now.